What is going on, guys? So today what I want to talk about is, of course, One Piece. We are finally getting back to One Piece. I know it's been a little while since I've made a video, but let's just get straight into it. I don't want to explain exactly why I've been slacking because that's exactly what's been going on. But yeah, let's just get straight into this video. So what I want to talk about is bounties in One Piece and how they are unique as power indicators compared to other series such as like Seven Deadly Sins, that is the series that I'm super into at the moment. There's a lot of different power scaling, different things like power indicators in different series such as Seven Deadly Sins, such as Hunter x Hunter, Dragon Ball, of course. That's pretty much how it all started. Power levels is the term that we use as just a general way of indicating people's powers in different series, but that term actually originally came from Dragon Ball, which is funny because I've never even seen any of it, and I use the word power level all the time. But yeah, now we just kind of have it, and we can use it in a different series all the time, such as Seven Deadly Sins. I believe the actual words they use a lot of the time are power levels, so that's kind of interesting. And it's pretty straightforward when you use it in any other series, such as One Piece even. And we have the bounty system, which gives us some kind of indication of how strong somebody is in the series. But the thing about One Piece, and this is true for some others as well, but very much so in One Piece, is that the bounty system has a lot of other uses, or at least the numbers reflect much more than just somebody's power levels. This has been shown many times in the series. It's said a lot of the time that it's not all just about how powerful they are, but how infamous they are, really, or how much of a threat to the world government they are. And that's not all it is, but that is a very important part. For example, the biggest example that people use a lot of the time is Kid. When we get to Sabo, he has a bounty of 315 million. And we're like, okay, well, he now has one higher than Luffy, which at the time was pretty much unheard of. I mean, Luffy jumped from 100 million to 300 million after defeating Lucci in Enies Lobby, which was insane. He got pretty much the biggest power boost in the series, except for maybe Gear 4, but even then, I don't know. I mean, from Gear 1 to 2 could have been bigger than from Gear 2 and 3 to 4. It's pretty hard to say. And I guess, there's Hockey too, but those were kind of separate. So I could very well see that having been the biggest power boost in the series. So when we see this guy who has a bigger bounty than Luffy, we're like, okay, so this guy's a complete monster. Although then Shaggy does explain later that the biggest reason he probably is so high up there is because he, he's not really the nicest guy. He goes around hurting civilians nonstop, which is a pretty big problem for a government. They're going to increase the bounty on someone if they're just that kind of criminal. Of course, Luffy is doing things kind of similar. He is declaring war against the world government, so that's also kind of unfair. But he did defeat Rob Lucci. So that really is the biggest reason his bounty was so high. In fact, I would argue that him defeating Rob Lucci is significantly more important to the world government than him declaring war on them. I mean, okay, you could have anyone. You could have Makino declare war against the world government. They're gonna be like, okay, we're not gonna put a 300 million bounty. We're not gonna put any bounty on you. We don't care. Like that. What are you gonna do? But Luffy actually has something to back that up, and then he defeats Rob Lucci, which is significantly more important than actually declaring war on them. Maybe if he was a Yonko, which he is now, but not the point, then he would, get a little bit more for that. But at the time, he was nothing of the sort. They didn't even care about him, really. Like, okay, well, this is just some kid. I mean, in Enies Lobby, it was like the biggest underestimation fest in the entire series. So that just goes without saying. But I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. Something I wanted to talk about, is how these bounties don't always reflect how powerful someone is, and there's many different examples of this in the series. Kid is just the most prevalent one, in my opinion, at least his former bounty. It's much more reasonable now. I think it should still be higher, especially since, spoilers, if you're not caught up in the manga, maybe skip like 30 seconds ahead, Kid now has Conqueror's Haki. That is a thing. So I used to think he was a lot weaker than I now currently do. I think him having Conqueror's Haki is an indication of him being a lot more powerful than I anticipated. So I was wrong there for sure. I'm guessing he's going to be very powerful. He could be even similar to Luffy. I could absolutely see them being rivals in the future. I think he's probably stronger than Law, which is something I did not anticipate at all. But yeah, he's probably definitely in the top 5 of the supernovas. And we got a ton of other people as well. I mean, the Warlords are actually probably the best example. There's like multiple Warlords that have just bounties that make no sense because they get frozen or whatever, but even then it's like, what's going on here? For example, we have Hancock, who has a frozen bounty of 80 million. The reason that is apparently because when she went on her first expedition, she came back with an 80 million bounty. So the world government was like, wow, that's really impressive. One expedition, you're already at an 80 million bounty. I guess, that's worthy of the title of Warlord. I don't know how that makes any sense whatsoever. I mean, I could see somebody going out on the first expedition and doing stuff that is so important that they could be offered the title of Warlord. That's not unreasonable at all. But her achieving an 80 million bounty was what caused them to think that she's good enough to be a warlord. That's what's insane to me, because what even is an expedition? I mean, I know the Kuja pirates have their own kind of thing where they go on expeditions, but Luffy had, a 300 million bounty by the end of his first expedition. What is an expedition? He's never really stopped. So I don't understand that entirely. I think that's very strange. And obviously, if bounties were entirely reflecting power levels, she would be significantly higher, probably easily over 500 million. So I think that's a really weird example. I think she should be a lot higher, and it's a little weird. And what's crazy too is it's not even that early in the series. A lot of the problems that we have with the bounties, you can think, well, it was a little bit earlier in the series. Oda didn't exactly know what he was doing with these. But this was about halfway through, a little bit less than that, but come on. This is a little ridiculous. So I thought that was a very strange one. Another warlord is Crocodile, actually. This one is a little bit more forgivable because it is earlier in the series. He was at 81 million. But now I know there's people that think he's as powerful as Dofi, and that's just, it's absurd. At least at the time of Marineford. People think that because of the scuffle they had with each other, that they're equal. It would be a death match. No. Dofi would absolutely destroy him in Marineford. Maybe something happened over the time skip. We've seen him with his boy Mr. One, so maybe he's a lot more powerful now. I don't know. But at that time, at least, he was nowhere near Dofi's power level. However, his 81 million was a little absurd. He was significantly stronger than that. He had a Logia. He just was insane. He took over an entire country, which had some decent people in it. And there was no threat to him at all. So if we didn't have Luffy coming in there and discovering how to defeat a Logia, he would have stood no chance at all. So, I don't know. It's just, I don't really understand that one. 81 million is a little low. I would think at that time in the series, something more somewhere between 200 and 300 million would have probably been more appropriate. But, it was earlier in the series. So I guess that one is more forgivable. The last warlord I do want to talk about is Dofi. His is much higher up, thank God. He was at 340 million when his was frozen, which is a lot better than those two, I guess. But at the same time, we have people like Cracker who are over 700, really approaching 800 million. And I think Dofi could defeat Cracker. All the evidence says so. I made a video talking about it. You guys are more than welcome to go and check that out. Even if he couldn't defeat him, he has to be somewhere near there. And he's at 340 million. I don't really understand that. I understand that Cracker is part of a Yonko crew. He's considered a commander of a Yonko crew. So that probably does help him a lot. But Dofi's backstory, it's quite an indication that he was a massive threat to the world government. They even had dedicated people to chase him down. And I don't think he really has gotten much stronger in the 10 years he spent in Dressrosa as a warlord since his bounty was frozen, because he's pretty much just chilling. All he really did was just hang out there working on the black market. I don't think he was getting at least significantly more powerful. So 340 should have been an indication of his current power levels, which I think is way too low. I think, again, if we're showing something that just completely reflects his power levels, he should be somewhere between 700 and 850 million. I think that would make way more sense, and I think that's just a weird thing that happens in the series. But again, that is why One Piece is so unique, is because we have situations like this where these bounties get frozen, so some weird stuff happens. I don't think it entirely makes sense, but it is an interesting dynamic in the series compared to others where the power levels are much more straightforward, and you can see, this guy has this power level, this guy has this one, which is higher than this one, so this guy's going to win. I mean, that's pretty much how it goes in Seven Deadly Sins. I've said before, of course, there are situations where that's not the case, like full counter is an extremely powerful ability, which isn't really accounted for in power levels, so that's kind of unfair. But mainly, it's whoever has the higher power level is going to win, where in One Piece, that's not the case at all. Another example, okay, of course, is Luffy. I mean, this guy just went from a... Spoilers again, skip however many seconds. He went from a 500 million bounty to a 1.5 billion bounty in the course of one arc. He did this by defeating Katakuri. Of course, it's reasonable that the world government doesn't really know that he defeated Katakuri. It was close enough, but I mean, Katakuri had just above 1 billion, and now Luffy is not just at 1.5 billion, but he's a Yonko, a Goko. It doesn't matter, guys. I think the term Yonko makes a lot more sense in this context, but not the point. Not what we're talking about right now. That is a whole different discussion, which I've gotten into way too many times on Twitter and stuff. Not even worth it. But I mean, that was crazy. Just by defeating Katakuri and disrupting the wedding at Totland, he goes from a 500 million bounty to 1.5 billion. So that's pretty outrageous. I mean, what's even going on there? It doesn't make any sense. And he definitely, I would assume that the other Yonkos are probably somewhere near there, even if it is a pretty big difference. They're probably like between 2 and 3 billion each. So Luffy should then be able to at least be like on their level. He should be able to compete with them, which clearly we can see is not the case at all. I mean, if Big Mom wasn't already obvious enough that he couldn't take her on at all, I think Kaido's made it pretty clear. I mean, the one shot, come on, like, he's nowhere near their level despite having a bounty that's probably kind of comparable. So, for whatever that's worth, that's a pretty weird one. Another one related to Big Mom is Tamago. He has a 429 million bounty, which might not sound that weird since he's like a sub-commander of the Big Mom Pirates. However, like I just said, Luffy is now considered a Yonko. And, okay, so we have Zoro, who is definitely, the second strongest on the crew, with a 320 million bounty, which I think is way too low. However, it's reasonable, I guess, since he didn't have his raised after Whole Cake Island since he wasn't present. I think it still should have been raised, just, since it makes sense he'd scale with the crew. There's no reason to think that he's not getting stronger, but it makes sense. Another reason that bounties are the way they are in One Piece, which is very cool. However, we have Sanji, who actually was a massive part of the Big Mom operation. He went from his 177 million bounty to a 330 million bounty, just 10 million above Zoro, which is, funny. And there are people that seriously do think that Sanji is now stronger than Zoro because of that, completely not understanding the bounty system at all and just anything about the series at all if you really think that Sanji is stronger than Zoro, but not the point at all. I mean, that's whatever, but so he went only to a 330 million bounty despite clearly being one of the commanders of a Yonko's crew. Luffy is now considered a Yonko, and Sanji is certainly one of the commanders. I mean, he's either the second or third strongest. So I think he should be a lot higher. I mean, if Cracker... Well, okay, Snack was originally the lowest ranking, or at least the weakest of the Sweet Commanders. He was at 600 million. I mean, that's really low compared to the others. And Sanji's barely half of that. I think that's really weird. I think it's a strange situation where for some reason Luffy's crew's just not getting the respect it deserved, which is pretty much, in line with how the series has been going so far. But hopefully they'll come out of Wano super strong. Sanji will maybe use his raid suit or something like that. Zoro will defeat some Yonko commanders and possibly achieve over 1 billion. I think he might be, like, right above that mark, like maybe 1,050,000 or something, like just barely above it. Something kind of weird like that. I could definitely see one of those like Katakuri situations where he's just slightly above it. 50,000 is a little bit less, of course. That's a strange number, but I could see it. I could definitely see it. Because I don't think he's going to have exactly 1 billion because that's what Jack has, and that would be a little redundant. So I think it might just be slightly above that. So yeah, I thought Tamago was pretty weird. Why is he so high if he's just a sub-commander of a Yonko's crew? If Sanji is a commander of a Yonko's crew, whatever Luffy being a Yonko is worth either way, and he's that much lower than Tamago. I thought that was strange. And the last one, outside of the Straw Hats that I want to talk about in a second, is Sabo. Sabo's is 602 million. I think that is absolutely absurd. I mean, this guy clearly, that is not a reflection of his power at all. If we're talking his power, I mean, I think he could defeat Katakuri. I think that's pretty clear. I know a lot of people in my Discord like to argue that Katakuri would actually stop Sabo, but that's just insane to me. I mean, it's like, okay, a lot of people say, well, maybe it's so low because he's always running covert operations and stuff. Since he's a member of the Revolutionary Army, not that many people know about him. But no, not really. First of all, he is the second in command of the Revolutionary Army. So the world government definitely knows about him and shit that he does all the time. That should be quite clear. And even if you think that's complete speculation, when he was in Dressrosa, after he took off, like, the beard or whatever, Diamante was immediately, like, with barely even having any vision of him, he just saw him barely and was like, oh my god, that's the guy from the Revolutionary Army, isn't it? So he's pretty well known. I don't understand why his bounty's so low. If he is a second in command of the Revolutionary Army, constantly running these operations, I would think that that would only increase his bounty in addition to being a reflection of his power level. So that is one that's completely bizarre to me. It's so insane, honestly, that I'm kind of thinking we might get an explanation. I'm thinking either Oda's going to be like, yeah, I think I was like on shrooms or something when I came up with that bounty, because he did like announce it outside of actual chapters. So that was interesting. And I think he'll either say something like that or just have some crazy explanations like, yeah, okay, I need to come up with something. There needs to be a reason for this because this is insane at the moment. So, yeah, I think 602 million for Sabo is outrageous. It makes no sense whatsoever. It is 2 million higher than Snack, who is garbage compared to the other Sweet Commanders, who I think Sabo could beat all of. And Katakuri is over 1 billion, and Sabo's barely half of that. So that's just crazy to me. And lastly, the last people I do want to talk about is within the Straw Hats themselves. I think they have a weird whole bounty situation going on. I mean, if I had to, just off the top, I had to rank the strength of the Straw Hats at this point, I would have Luffy, and then Zoro, and then Jinbei, Sanji. I kind of want to include Carrot there, but I won't since she's not currently a member of the Straw Hats. I would have that followed by Brook, and then Robin, and then Franky, Chopper, Nami, and then Usopp. So that seems pretty reasonable to me. I can see people disagreeing with a few in between there, but not too far apart. I know most people think that Nami's the weakest, but that's just insane, especially now after the whole Zeus situation. But I mean, what's so weird about that is, at least with the way I just ranked them, their bounties are completely out of order. None of them fell into place at all. At least with 3 in particular I'm talking about. Of course, a lot of them actually do work. But so, with Robin, we have her at 130 million now, which is kind of low in my opinion, but not really the point. The weird thing is that we have Franky, who is at 94 million, and Brook, who is at 83 million. So the one I thought was the strongest of the 3 of them is actually the lowest, and barely even half of the one that's the highest, who should be second in my opinion. I mean, I think Brook is clearly stronger than those two, and he's only at 83 million, and Robin's at 130 million. Which I do understand there's reasoning because she was already so high to begin with. She pretty much started where Brook is now. But it's still a little strange because she has not done that much in the New World except participate in Dressrosa. She didn't really accomplish that much, to be completely honest. And Franky kind of did. I mean, he did a decent amount. He was the one in charge of taking down the factory, and he did have to deal with Senior Pink, and what did Robin really do? And he's only at 94 million. I think that's really weird. I could even see him being stronger than Robin at this point. Those two are the ones I flip between the most on the Straw Hat crew. And he is significantly lower than her, and is somehow still higher than Brook. It's just so weird. The bounty system in One Piece is so all over the place. It really cannot be used as any indication of power at any point. I mean, sometimes it's pretty clear. Of course, okay, Luffy's, 1.5 billion. That is really obvious that he's going to be stronger than a lot of people. Anyone who's below 300 million. Of course, he's going to be stronger than them with a bounty like that. But then there's even situations where that's not true. Buggy is at 15k. And that's... Oh, no, not 15k. 15 million, of course. And it's Okay. I mean, that kind of made sense at the beginning of the series. Maybe. I mean, he might have even been lower than that at the beginning of the series. But at this point, it's like, how strong even is he? His bounty's frozen at 15 million, but he's a warlord. And he seems to have a lot of respect, which is for reasons that are kind of weird. But I think he might actually be kind of powerful. I mean, he does have a really good devil fruit. I'm not saying he's insane. Like, he's not going to be like a Yonko commander level, but I could see him being kind of decent. So having a 15 million bounty frozen is pretty insane to me. I don't know. That's pretty much all I wanted to say in this video. I just wanted to go over all these bounties that are so all over the place. Despite these people being, some of the most powerful characters we've seen in the series, they have bounties that are significantly lower than other people. Maybe they're frozen, but sometimes they're not either, and it's just like, what's going on here? It's a lot different than the other series power indicators that we see. Seven Deadly Sins is like the most straightforward I've ever seen. Dragon Ball, from my understanding, is one of the most straightforward of all time. But these bounties, while they do reflect your power level to an extent, they do not entirely, and there are so many other factors that go into it. And this isn't really a thing in other series, and I think that is very interesting. I wish that it was more consistent with how these things add up, and we got more information as to like the crimes that people actually committed that got them these bounties, like Kid or whatever when he was at Sabo. But I don't know. I'm hoping that this will be more fleshed out in the future, but I do love it as is. I like how it is unique to other series, and it is really cool. I think Oda will work on it a lot more in the future, and it will end up being very fun to see go back and just like be like, oh, this makes so much sense. All these different bounties. It really is interesting how well they are recorded and whatnot, and how they change throughout the series. It's always exciting, when the Straw Hats get a new big bounty update. I mean, at the end of Whole Cake Island, that was insane. Luffy's huge jump. It's just so exciting to see, like, oh, where are these guys now? The most exciting one really is to see Chopper's, right? He doubled his in a very short period of time, so that's pretty impressive. Not really too short of time. The time skip was involved, but that doesn't really count. That's kind of like dead time. So he did double his bounty in a very short time. That's pretty impressive if you're not a captain. So, yeah, that's kind of a joke. But that's all I really want to say, guys. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video. Make sure to leave a comment letting me know if you did. I don't know if you guys like these kind of face cam videos. A lot of people have commented that they do want more, and I'm surprised. I'm like, oh, really? This is pretty easy for me to do. I really don't have to do anything. I just sit here, and I kind of do what Tekken does, right? He just sits on his bed and just rambles on for 20 or 30 minutes. I've always thought that was something I envied about him. He could just do that, and people love it. And I love it. I love Tekken. I love his videos. So, yeah. Let me know if you guys do like these kind of videos. If you like this topic, make sure to comment more topics you'd like me to go over. Maybe some versus battles. I haven't done one in a long time. It's because One Piece is nowhere near complete right now, so it's really hard to say how strong a lot of people are. But I would like to do more in the future. So if you guys do come up with a really good idea for one, I would love to do it. Maybe I will do that soon. Maybe we'll have one coming up this week. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully I will talk to you soon. I hope you guys have an excellent rest of your weekend. And yeah, thanks for watching.